Depression is something that impacts a lot of people and is often portrayed in seinen protagonists, and Thorfinn from Vinland Saga is of course not exempt from this trend. Hey, what's up guys, this is Dorian here. Today let's talk about depression, particularly Thorfinn's case in Vinland Saga, which is a particularly intriguing one. So, Thorfinn is the main protagonist of Vinland Saga, who we all love, and we love to see his development. And of course, within his development, we see a phase where Thorfinn is depressed, and it is actually a very prominent scene now, or well, a set of scenes in the Vinland community because of season 2 dropping not long ago. So Thorfinn's life really begins when he is a young impressionistic child, and just like a lot of us, since we are very impressionistic. So yeah, that's where it begins. Thorfinn is a very impressionistic child, and since he's a very impressionistic child, he of course does not know where to go in life. And of course, he sees fighting as something that he really wants to do, and we often think back on the past and find ourselves cringing. So there's that. On top of the fact that since Thorfinn sees fighting as something that is really cool, his perception of this is quickly changed when he sees Thor's die in front of him, and it becomes something that he has to do and he must do, since this is his new purpose in life. And Thorfinn finally finds a purpose in life, such as a lot of people walking through life do. So since Thorfinn finds this purpose in life, that being revenge, he obviously has a fixation with Askeladd, and the fact on the matter is that Thorfinn feels that he must take down Askeladd no matter what happens, since Askeladd in Thorfinn's eyes is a scum. And the intriguing part is that he actually decides to side with Askeladd since he's desperate to that degree. And if for example he had a better opportunity, he would say something like, I can imagine Thorfinn saying something like, I would never side with Askeladd, or something of the sort. But anyways, Thorfinn decides to side with Askeladd, and that actually ends up leading to Thorfinn becoming stronger. However, frequently during their relationship, Askeladd actually questions Thorfinn several times on what he even plans to do in the future. But since Thorfinn resents Askeladd and has a lot of cognitive dissonance around Askeladd, he actually ignores him. Why does Thorfinn ignore him? Well, because he does not want to take Askeladd's word seriously, and he actually dislikes Askeladd and does not see him as a figure of importance, or rather a figure of positive importance. So that's actually why Thorfinn decides to ignore Askeladd, and Askeladd's words never really process into Thorfinn's mind, and he actually just mindlessly attacks Askeladd, such as a lot of us even do. Even if someone we hate brings up a good point, we actually inside we do not want to listen to that person, even if we do believe he or she is right. So that actually ends up happening a lot. So with that out of the way though, Thorfinn's depression still has not begun. Yes, he has a lot of PTSD, and literally it's to the point where he can see a door knock as something that he must be afraid of and attack, such as can be seen when a girl who is working at a bar where Askeladd and his crew take refuge and actually is curious about Thorfinn and comes to him, and Thorfinn sees this as a signal of danger and actually attempts to attack her. But he realizes all she wanted was to talk to Thorfinn. But regardless, later on we see Thorfinn actually lose his purpose in life, and that's where his depression sadly even begins. We see Askeladd die in front of Thorfinn, and Thorfinn is in shock because he thought that he will one day kill Askeladd, but that cannot even happen now because someone has actually taken his goal from him, that being Canute. And since Canute has taken away Thorfinn's goal, he actually does not know what to do next, and actually hates his life now because the one thing he wanted to do most, he cannot do anymore, and he is very confused. And because of his confusion and sorrow, he actually decides to leave the battlefield, and Thorfinn finds himself in a farmland a few years later working as a slave. So since Thorfinn is a slave now, we can see that Thorfinn does acknowledge that slaves are lower class people, as can be seen in his dialogue before that entire scene. So since Thorfinn does acknowledge that, we can see that he does not care anymore, And this is where Thorfinn actually begins to show symptoms of depression. We can see that he is very emotionless, and he actually does not. He is very confused in life. He does not know what to do. He's puzzled. He has traumas from the past come to haunt him. He really hates his life, and even says that not a single good thing has even ever happened to him. And that's actually just the beginning of his symptoms of depression. His lower energy, his tendency to like sleep and crave it, and also the fact that he actually aims for something simple and is avoiding a lot of problems that actually his mind is aware of, but he himself takes the action to not confront his problems. So yeah, we are clearly seeing Thorfinn and his combat with depression. So since Thorfinn is now depressed because of losing Askeladd, the person who would actually give him his goal, or rather was the reason he even lived, indirectly, because Askeladd did become the reason Thorfinn even lived. So Thorfinn, despite how much Thorfinn despised Askeladd, he was actually the reason Thorfinn was alive for so long, for a lot of reasons, not just the protection he gave him, and not just because Thorfinn's goal surrounded Askeladd, but yeah, that's why Thorfinn was alive for so long. And now he's very, very clueless, and sadly, he has no hope. And a lot of us even do this because, like, when we are confused, we actually tend to block out our fears and instead of confronting him. And now this is what happens next. Because Thorfinn has not really come to terms with his shadow and his past self and a lot of his developments over time, Thorfinn has begun to take a more philosophical stance towards his life. However, he still has not really pondered deeply about his fears and whatever happened back then. He has come to a point where he acknowledges that combat and fighting are unnecessary and no one has to die. However, he still has not come to terms with a lot of things, and he still does not know what he thinks of Askeladd anymore, because a lot of time has elapsed. When we hate someone, we really do only hate them for a certain period of time, and especially in the present. But since Askeladd is literally gone and Thorfinn has no means of seeing Askeladd now, he actually does not know what comes next. And since he does not know what comes next, he actually does not even know what he thinks of Askeladd anymore, and whether he should even obsess over him. This is even more emphasized when Askeladd literally visits Thorfinn in his nightmare, where Thorfinn is in a supposed Valhalla, and Thorfinn is confronted by the corpses of a lot of people that he has killed, and they are zombies now, and they are literally approaching Thorfinn, and Thorfinn is, well, petrified, and Askeladd actually saves him again, much to Thorfinn's dismay. And that actually ends up happening, and Thorfinn is really pissed because, well, his life cannot get any worse. The person he hates ends up being the one who gives him the meaning in life again and again. And this is actually worsened when Canute actually infiltrates the farm. And because when Canute infiltrates the farm, Thorfinn actually does not view Canute as an enemy anymore, because he does not view Askeladd as an enemy anymore, because it should be kept in mind, this is important, because Canute was the person who killed Askeladd and in a sense took away Thorfinn's goal for him, even though it can be argued that Askeladd could have been killed by any other person at that time, but it was Canute who dealt the blow. So yeah, that's why Thorfinn actually, it's interesting to see Thorfinn's development now, because we can see that a lot of us, he has actually moved on now, or well, not like a lot of us, because Thorfinn actually does live in battle, but yeah, he has moved on now, and it's interesting to see his new developments. And here's where Thorfinn begins to exit his depression. Right after his encounter with Canute, he is now a free slave. Soon, on unrelated terms, he is now a free slave, and he's not a slave anymore because Leif actually purchases him. But yeah, now Thorfinn is free, and Thorfinn actually ponders and actually becomes a lot like Thor's, ironically enough, and actually ends up contributing to the cycle, since that's very similar to how Thor's was. And since Thor's also decided to at one point conclude that fighting is meaningless and no one has to die, and that's exactly what Thorfinn also concluded, and we see Thorfinn actually develop as a character. And now that Thorfinn is developed, he actually has a new vision in mind, And since he has a new vision in mind, this one's more positive, and he's actually in turn more hopeful. And since he is more hopeful, his depression is now slowly vanishing away, even though some symptoms may have remained. But Thorfinn, in the overall sense, this is more positive now, even though he still has some symptoms like, well, being too low in energy. Because as we can remember, Kid Thorfinn would just say anything that was on his mind. But Thorfinn, as he has grown up, actually tends to keep quiet, even when he is confronted by his mother and sister on why he was away for so long. He tends to just not speak. We can see that Thorfinn has quieted down now. So yeah, Thorfinn's journey is a very interesting one, and one where we can extract a lot of lessons from. Or well, not lessons, since well, this is more so of a human experience, and something that lets us reflect on both our lives in terms of metaphors, and not necessarily in the literal sense, though the literal sense as well. But yeah, that's why Thorfinn's life is really interesting for us as viewers to take note of. So yeah, with that out of the way, I would just like to say this was my analysis on Thorfinn's depression and why it's and all the points why it makes for a very intriguing case. And if you enjoyed today's video and would like to see more, let me know what kind of videos you would like to see more in the comments down below. And with that out of the way, make sure to subscribe, gamers, and like the video if you enjoyed. With that out of the way, I will see you guys next time. Take care gamers. Bye.